Evening, everyone. Welcome to the Scrutiny Committee of the 7th of March for this call-in of the item from TMAC. Just to remind council members, officers and members of the public to leave the meeting if you wish to make or receive a telephone call. All council members are reminded that there is a signing-in sheet for them to sign to help facilitate recording on members' attendance on the website. In regards to the papers that are in front of you, if you plan to refer to a specific page in a report or appendix, please use the pack page number on the bottom right hand of the page rather than report number. This should help ensure that everyone can find the correct page. I would also ask the public and councillors to note that this meeting is being filmed for live and subsequent broadcast via the council's internet site. If you're in the upstairs, you're not being filmed. However, by entering the meeting room down here, you are consented to being filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings being used for the purposes described. I would also ask people to note that the webcasting system uses a signal from the microphone system, so members are reminded to please use the microphone provided to ensure your contribution is recorded. Please also turn off the microphone off again when you have finished speaking. That was my example of turning it off and on. Okay, probably the highlight of the meeting. Item 1, which is apologies for absence. So currently, as at 4 o'clock, we've had a couple of apologies. Councillor Mary Coutura can't make the meeting, and so Councillor Mike Fisher is deputising. And we also had Councillor Sherwin Chowdhury, and Bernadette Khan is deputising for Bernadette. No
others, Chair.
Sorry?
No others.
No one else. Okay. For that moment, I thought that was someone. No one. Item 2, disclosure of interests. Member invited to disclose any pecuniary interests that are not already on the register of interests. Form are available from Kate. Sherwin is here now. Okay. Okay. So we're having a late substitution or an early bath, whichever way you want to. Yes. Thank you. So welcome to Councillor Chowdhury for coming to the meeting. So just to sort of say for the record that Councillor Bernadette Khan is now not a member of the committee for tonight. And we only have one apologies for absence from item 1. So item 2, we have disclosure of interests. As I said, everyone's got. Does anyone have any disclosure of pecuniary interests? Not already mentioned. Okay. Item 3, urgent business. There are none, but I should point out that there is we are having a presentation, and I need to check with officers whether this is up on the website today or will it go up at midnight. Right. Okay, so you will be able to see it live on the webcast, but you won't be able to download it until 12 midnight. So item 4, exempt items, there are none. So item 5, which is the substantive business of tonight, which is a call-in of the North Croydon area-wide 20-mile-an-hour speed limit statutory consultation reports on objections. And tonight we have in attendance, I don't think, Councillor Caffey, could you just run through the people with you tonight?
Sorry. Councillor Robert Canning, who's my deputy, Jonah Greeny, who's the Executive Director of Place, Steve Isles, who's the Director of Streets, Mike Barton, who is the Service Manager for Highway Improvements, thank you, and Wahid Alam, who is the officer who's done an enormous amount of work, actually, on 20 mile an hour. Excellent work, and I can't quite remember his job title. Traffic engineer.
Thank you, Kathy. I just going to explain slightly how we're going to run tonight. This isn't an ordinary meeting of Scrutiny Committee. It's a call-in of a executive decision, and the process is as follows. What we're going to do is I'm going to ask Councillor Sarah Bashford to explain the reasons for the call-in, because obviously it's been called in by 14 councillors, which meets the criteria of a call-in for a key decision. Then I'm going to invite the Cabinet member to respond and explain her reasons for the decision. And as I understand, in that explanation, there will be a presentation by Councillor Cafferby, which I sort of pointed out earlier. It would also be the case that we'll just have a discussion about whether we are going to hear the call-in and how much time we're going to deal with it. But before that, I should point out to people who have come here tonight that this is a meeting held in public, but Scrutiny is very keen to make certain that the voice of the ordinary person or the person who has a stake in this is given a chance to air their voice. So we will give, I do have the discretion to allow non-members of the committee to address us, and I'll be doing that both in terms of people speaking for and against this proposal, but also I'm inviting councillors from the affected areas, because they are the representatives of those wards, and also opposition's spokesperson who obviously may have something else to add. Then, once we've had the opportunity for ward for an explanation for the decision, we've had a review, and we've had people to chance, we will then make a decision whether we will decide to overturn the decision and send it back to the Cabinet, or potentially send it up to Cabinet, to Council, or let it stand. But that will be at the end of our deliberations. So first I'm going to do is ask Councillor Sarah Bashford to explain the reasons for the call-in.
Thank you, Chair. We've called this decision in as we believe that it does not represent good value for money, and that placing restrictions in specific areas such as outside of schools is more effective to control speeds. We do support the introduction of 20 mph in specific roads where residents have identified an issue such as speeding cars and support the proposal, or where there is specific needs such as outside schools or care homes. We do not support a blanket approach which does not consider the individual areas in a zone. We do not support the spending of £300,000 in an area where the council survey found people already drive slowly in up to 95% of the roads, and that the average speed was only 24 mph. This works out at £75,000 to reduce speed by 1 mph. The support for the proposed scheme was somewhat underwhelming, as only 3% of residents responded. As we know, it is those who hold strong opinions that comment, and the majority who are content stay silent as they don't feel a need to be heard. Therefore, 97% of residents were silent, and we can therefore assume happy with the status quo. Would they rather the £300,000 was spent on targeted measures to address specific problems? I think they would. I also believe this offers residents far better value for money, as targeted schemes will bring larger benefits. I'd also like this committee to consider what the £300,000 is being spent on. It isn't additional calming measures or an increase in enforcement staff, it's on signage. And I would like members to recall when this was first discussed at Scrutiny, when the police stated they would not be enforcing the speed reduction as they didn't have the capacity to do so. Therefore, the signs will be erected, and if people choose to abide by them, great, as they are almost certainly the ones who obeyed the speed limit or the ones who drove slowly anyway. The ones who ignore the current speed limits will of course ignore the new ones. So I'm not sure how this can be seen as good value for money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bashford. What I need then is to invite the Cabinet member to respond and explain her reasons for the decision.
Thank you. So, just to recap, the key features of the call-in seem to be that centre around speed and the cost of an area-wide scheme versus the cost of implementing 20 mile an hour in individual streets. And before I respond to those points, I want to start off with a bit of background. So, firstly, actually, this is not a new thing. It's happened across a lot of London. A lot of cities are now taking up 20 mile an hour. 55% of roads in London are already 20 mile an hour, and 35% of Londoners live in a 20 mile per hour borough. This is something that we put in our manifesto. It's already been to scrutiny. It was in scrutiny September 2014. The scheme, in principle, went to Cabinet in March last year, as did the Transport Vision, which also included this. And the details of the scheme have not changed since the Cabinet paper in March, which was not called in and therefore seems to have had support. So why 20 mile an hour? Why is everybody doing this? Well, there are three main reasons, and obviously the first one is about accidents and casualties. And there you've got the figures in terms of the risk of a fatality and the difference between 20 and 30 miles an hour, and that is a huge difference. And it's also DFT data that tells us that a 1% reduction in the average speed equals a 6% reduction in traffic accidents. So, just preventing one accident actually is really quite significant in terms of impact. What is the price on road safety for people in Croydon, particularly children who are much more at risk? Another point is a better environment. Actually, our roads form the majority of our public realm, the place where people walk, where they are out and about meeting each other. So roads are not just about moving cars around. There are a range of roads, so clearly motorways are pretty much about moving cars around, and there are no pavements there. You do not expect to see people walking. We differentiate between the nature of our roads, and on the roads which are outside people's houses, the roads they use to get home are very much places where you would expect to meet your neighbours, where people will walk to get around in the local area. And therefore it's important that we consider the movement of people on foot and on bike, in wheelchairs, pushing buggies and prams, as well as the movement of cars. And leading on from that, Croydon has a really big problem in terms of our levels of activity, and that has a huge impact on health in the area. So there are a number of really serious health problems, such as diabetes, that would be very much impacted if we could increase the activity levels of our residents, and that could happen very much through increasing the amount that people walk and cycle. So I'm not claiming for 1 minute that putting in 20 mile an hour speed limits will solve all the health problems of Croydon, but it's one part of many approaches that we need to make in order to get the health benefits for our residents from increasing activity. So what is the evidence for the impact of 20 mile an hour? I said we are not the first people to be looking at this, so we've got the benefit of being able to look at what other people have been doing. And I was at a conference recently where somebody from Edinburgh was telling us about the outcome of their pilot. They did a substantial area of the city as a pilot, and they're now going to roll out 20 mile an hour across the city as a whole. And in roads where the average speed was below 24 miles an hour, they actually got an average reduction of 1.9. Now that, on the DFT figures, would equal to a 12% reduction in casualties. On the roads where the average is above 24 miles an hour, again, that was 3.3 miles, a reduction of 3.3 miles per hour. Now that, would equate to, again, on the DFT figures, of an 18% reduction in casualties. And really interestingly there, they also had a reduction of 0.7 miles an hour on the roads that remained at 30 miles an hour. So that's an added benefit, and we very much believe that that comes from the change in behaviour that you get from implementing area-wide speed reductions. The figure of 24 miles an hour comes up when we're talking about averages, because that is the level at which the DFT differentiates between those roads which they would expect to see 20 mile an hour implemented with and without speed humps. But you can see here that the reduction where the average speed was above 24 miles an hour was really much greater than the reduction in the other speed, which is what we want to see. And it shows that introducing speed limits only really does have a significant effect on average speeds. Now, the other point that, carrying on with the evidence, the DFT have commissioned Atkins, a consultancy firm, to do research in the areas where 20 mile an hour has been implemented. And again, we got some early feedback on this at the conference that I attended. So interestingly, support for 20 mile an hour almost universally increases very significantly after implementation. And the majority of people in areas where 20 mile an hour has been introduced believe that it has increased safety for pedestrians and cyclists. And you can see here that there is also an increase in people saying that they are increasing the amount of walking and cycling that they are doing. So those are demonstrable impacts from introducing 20 mile an hour. So we're not doing this without evidence to support the benefits. In Croydon, we did ask people specifically about lowering the speed in the area that was shown. We were not asking people about their own road. Did they have any concerns about it? We wanted people to indicate whether they wanted an area-wide scheme, and we did get a majority in favour. It was 52.5% in favour. And we did this on a household survey. It was not done with individuals. So in any household where 2 or more people responded, we weeded out extras, more than what we only allowed 1 result for that household. So there was an amalgamation of the results that they had given us. And so we have support across the area for an area-wide scheme. And again, interestingly, 50% of respondents said they would drive more slowly, but only 22% said they would not. So a lot of those people who said that they didn't support this scheme still said that they would drive more slowly. The same applies to the proportion of people who thought that 20 mile an hour would reduce accidents. And we've also got figures here in terms of the proportion of those responding who said they would either walk or cycle more. And so the indicators are already here that we would get some of the behaviour changes that we wanted. So as part of the process, we measured speeds before. We will go back to the same roads and we will measure the speeds after implementation. And as you see, most of them do indeed have an average speed below 24 miles per hour, which is very good because actually what the police have said is that they will enforce without any concerns in those roads where the average speed is below 24 miles an hour. So the majority of the area, the police would already be happy to enforce. And what we have said is once we do the surveys of the speeds after the 20 mile an hour has gone in, we will have a look for any areas where there are still speeding problems. And there are 1 or 2 hotspots that I'm sure a number of us could name. And we will look at other actions that we can take there in the second phase of the programme. So just to avoid any confusion about what an average speed means, what we have here is the distribution of speed. So there's sort of a standard graph around the distribution of speed. So although the average could be, say that as the average is 24 miles an hour, you have this long tail of people exceeding 24 miles an hour. And as I said earlier, our aim is not that we want to get speeds down to 30 miles an hour. The concern is not people who are going above 30 miles an hour. Our intention is to get speeds as close as we can to 20 miles an hour, because as you have seen, that brings with it a huge decrease in the proportion of accidents that would be a fatality. So again, if you can see, if you get a reduction in this, let's go back. When you get a reduction in the speed, you do get quite a significant drop again in the cars going above the average speed. And just to be clear about what those speeds are, I hope this is big enough for you to see. Here are 4 sample roads from the survey. You've got 2 lines on each, so that's because the traffic goes in 2 different directions. You can see here, this is the 85th percentile, so 85% of cars are going at or below that speed. You've got the mean speed, and then you've got the distribution along here of the actual speeds that were recorded. So where the mean speed is 24.9 miles per hour, you have a lot of cars going between 20 and 30, and quite a lot going above 30. So that shows that there's a lot of capacity here to get the speed down closer to 20 miles an hour. So just because the mean speed, or the average speed, is 24 miles per hour, does not mean that cars are mainly going at 24 miles an hour, and there are a lot of cars that we would like to see going slower. Again, at where the mean speed is 21 miles per hour, you've still got, obviously this is a much lower volume road, but you've still got a lot of traffic going significantly above 20 miles an hour. And obviously you've got these long tails here. So, up here, you've still got a number of cars going, over 40. And 1 or 2 down here, you've got them going over 50. So, again, here, there's just more examples of the same. You can see that with an average of 22.1, I mean, this one, we've got a higher proportion here. But again, we've still got a lot of cars going 21 to 26. So I think the idea that an average speed of 24 miles per hour or even less means that everybody is going slowly is not borne out by the actual speed data. So we want to get the speed of all of these cars going above 20 miles an hour. We want to get their speed down. And cost, this is the other issue that's been brought up. So just to be clear again on cost, if we were to do a single road at a time, each road is going to cost us £6,000. Doing all the roads in Area 1 costs us £750 a road. So we would get, I think the total number of roads that we would get done for the 1.5 million is something like 250 if we did them on an individual basis. So this is an extremely cost-effective way of delivering a reduction in road casualties across the borough as a whole. And again, I just want to draw your attention to the Traffic Management Advisory Committee, where we discussed this paper. This is a meeting where lots of people turn up to give us their views if they're not happy with a proposal that's coming to the committee, whether it's a double yellow line, a controlled parking zone, or one way. We get a lot of representation, and nobody from the area concerned came along to tell us that they didn't like it. The only person that came along to tell us they didn't like it was a resident of Coulsdon, who presumably drives through Croydon North. So, as I said, my conclusions are that we've got good data to show that traffic is travelling well above 20 miles an hour in the area concerned, and that given the cost per road, this is an extremely cost-effective way of reducing casualties, improving our public realm, and encouraging people to walk and cycle. And I'm happy to take questions, and I'm sure the officers will also be very happy to take detailed questions.
Thank you, Kathy, for that presentation. At this stage, while we're getting ourselves organised, as a committee, we need to decide whether how we're going to treat this call-in and how we'd like to deal with the item, including whether or not we want to review the decision. Obviously, we've heard that this decision was originally called in by 14 councillors, and having heard, though, what Councillor B has said, I think we need to take into account whether this is something that we would like to spend some time reviewing. I'm of the opinion that if 14 councillors take the time to organise themselves and put forward a case, then we as a committee, regardless of whether anyone else is interested in Croydon, should listen to what those 14 councillors have to say, and we should review this matter. If we do review this matter, I'm proposing that we will allow there's a couple of people objecting to this. Allow them to speak first. Then I'm going to call though I'll also ask Jeremy Leach from 20 for Plenty, who I understand Plenty for Us is here, speaking in favour for the decision, so I'll allow them to speak first. Then I'll allow ward members to speak. Everyone's only going to get 2 minutes each, so you will need to be clear. And then I'll also bring in Councillor Vidhi Mohan, who I believe is also. And then, once we've gone through all the 2 minutes, I'm going to then suggest that we may have some questions to ask of people, and then we will obviously take a decision. So I will ask whether you are in agreement with my proposal that we review this decision in the manner I have just set out. Thank you. Okay, so in that case, we are going to review this decision. So I'm going to call, I think, Peter Morgan. You can speak first, and then I believe we have a Roger Lawson from the Alliance of British Drivers here. So you'll speak, and then third speaker will be Jeremy Leach, and then I'll deal with the councillors after that. But that can be the order. Peter, Roger, Jeremy.
Oh, so I couldn't see it. Oh, thank you. Mr. Chairman, first of all, I should say Emmanuel Hiram, who lives in Thornton Heath, did register to speak. I was only informed about 3 o'clock this afternoon that we will be able to speak, so he's not here tonight. I have to discuss that with him, so I am to some extent speaking on his behalf. He's an objector who did register to speak, but isn't here.
I'm sorry. If that was going to happen, it would have come over my desk. As I said, you have 2 minutes. I'm going to start you now, and then you need to really put your case forward. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry. The presentation that Cathy B produced contains some actual evidence, but it also contains a number of assertions which we're not in a position to challenge. And the evidence for the allegation on cost has not been provided. And I would challenge the distinction at the 6,000 and the 750. Thank you. Secondly, I want to say something about the consultation. The pledge in the manifesto was we will support 20-mile-per-hour zones in residential areas where communities want them. The council has chosen an artificial division of a very large area, and the council has refused to produce information on postcodes. A freedom of information request was made last June, and the council has frustrated this over and over again. The ICO has been brought in. They've directed the council to release some information, and it is still ongoing. I've actually got some partial postcode data, and what that shows is in CRO, which is Croydon and Broad Green, 57% said no. In CR7, which is Thornton Heath, 61% said no. In SW16, which is Norbury, 52% said no. In SE19, which is Upper Norwood, and SE25, which is South Norwood, there was a yes vote. That's using the actual data that was given. So when we say there's 52% for North Croydon is not really an area. Norbury, Upper Norwood, South Norwood, Thornton Heath are areas, Broad Green are areas. And when you actually look at the evidence, there was a no vote in Croydon and Broad Green, in Thornton Heath and in Norbury, and a yes vote in South Norwood and in Upper Norwood. And the reason the overall thing came out as a yes is because more people responded from that area. So I've done it. So I've worked through the postcodes, and that's absolutely clear. And I can produce the data if you want to see it. Second thing I want to say, the police raised concerns about this scheme in their response, and they pointed out that there were 52 roads where the speeds were over 24 miles an hour, roughly a quarter, depending how you look at it. And they asked the question, I asked what engineering features are being considered to reduce the speeds along those roads. So the police raised that concern. And the other thing I want to say, if I may, in terms of the actual responses, Sarah Basher made a couple of comments. There was 6% responded, 3.1% said yes, 2.8% said no, and there is evidence of ballot stuffing in terms of the way paper responses were produced, and I can produce more evidence for that if anyone wants to see it. In the short, and I should just say, I have a mathematics and statistical qualification in terms of my comments on the numbers. Have I used my 2 minutes?
Yes, you have.
Thank you.
Roger?
Good evening, councillors. I understand the call-in has taken place because of concerns about the cost of the proposed 30-mile-an-hour wide area scheme in North Croydon. At a cost of £300,000, it is certainly likely to be a waste of money. The main arguments for 20-mile-an-hour schemes have always relied on the benefits to road safety. In other words, that accidents and injuries will be reduced. But this is a mirage and is not borne out by the evidence available to date. Claims for such benefits are wrong, and that is why the Department of Transport has commissioned more research into this topic. For example, the latest part of London to introduce a wide area 20-mile-an-hour scheme was the City of London, and the initial evidence there is that injury accidents actually rose afterwards. The other claims, such as improving livability, are basically just hot air with no substance in reality. Introducing a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit does not encourage more people to walk or cycle. They might think they do, but they don't in reality. There is no simple, hard evidence to show this. All you get is a likely 1 mile-an-hour reduction in average traffic speed for a signed-only scheme. That is all you will get, not a reduction in accidents. So in reality, nothing much will change, but you want to spend £300,000 of taxpayers' money on just one part of Croydon to prove how pointless it will be. If you have £300,000 to spend on road safety, it would be much better spent on other road safety initiatives or point solutions that would be much more cost effective. It is most regrettable that these proposals have been put forward by those ignorant of the facts and supported by a rigged public consultation exercise, which the previous speaker can expand on if you wish, no doubt. That is all I wish to say, but I hope councillors will see sense on this matter and not pour £300,000 of taxpayers' money down the drain. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Thank you. Roger, can you turn your...
Sorry.
Thank you very much for inviting us to speak, Chair. Underpinning the debate about 20-mile-an-hour speed limits is the impact that reducing motor vehicle speeds to 20 mile an hour has on road casualties. The definitive study by the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in 2009 found that across 385 20-mile-an-hour zones in London, casualties fell by 42%. When maximum speeds are reduced to 20 mile an hour, casualty numbers are almost halved. Why is this significant for Croydon? In 2014, Croydon had the highest number of fatalities of any borough in London, jointly with Lambeth, as 9 people died on its roads. In 2013, 13 people died on the roads in Croydon. The borough with the second highest number of fatalities was Barnet, with 8 fatalities. In 2014, Croydon had the second highest number of pedestrian casualties of any London borough, with 243 pedestrians injured. Introducing 20-mile-an-hour limits are a starting point to address these issues. They change the balance between vehicles and people, making the road safer, especially for vulnerable road users, such as those who walk and cycle. Recent developments are making it more likely that the speed limit will be enforced. The creation of the Metropolitan Police and Roads Transport Policing Command in March 2015 has led to an increase in enforcement in 20-mile-an-hour boroughs across London. The introduction of Community Road Watch, backed by TfL and the Metropolitan Police, is now also adding significant new resources to enforcement of 20-mile-an-hour limits. For years, Croydon has seen unacceptable levels of road casualties, with casualties seen throughout the road network and not just in isolated streets and roads or in locations such as outside schools. 20-mile-an-hour limits supported by police enforcement can start to address the systemic problem of road danger that Croydon has on its roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. So we've heard three people who have spoken either for or against. I don't see any other members of the public who wish to speak, so I'm going to go over to councillors. I have on my list Councillor Maggie Mansell, so then I've got Matthew, so it'll be Maggie, Matthew and Stewart would be the first three, and I'll take, as I said, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, there are 3 residents' associations in Norbury which had asked us to introduce 20-mile-an-hour zones before the last election and contributed their views to the idea of bringing this in, and they continue to support it. They represent approximately half of Norbury. Now, half of Norbury is in this area, the eastern side of London Road, but not the western side. The people who are in the area are saying, why isn't it in now? We want it now, as soon as possible. What's the delay? The people on the other side are saying, why can't we be in Zone 1? We're in Zone 3. So there is an appetite for this. People actually want it, even whether they responded to the consultation or not. The other issue is that the slower the traffic, the less serious are any injuries. And that point hasn't been made, and I think it's an important one, that I'd rather have damage-only injuries rather than personal injury. As I was coming here tonight, as I came out of the house where I was having my tea, there were a couple of fire appliances, a lot of police and ambulance at a junction. There was clearly a serious accident had taken place, and traffic was disrupted around. I had to take detours. That exact spot was the site of an accident on Christmas Day. This is a road that is not a main road, and it is subject to fast traffic, and I think it's important to do everything we can to reduce speed.
Thank you, Maggie. Second is Matthew.
Thank you very much, Chair. I sit here as a ward councillor for Thornton Heath. I live in my ward on Cranbrook Road. I'm quite surprised that other councillors who did this calling are not here. There are 14 of them who feel so much grieved by this decision. I would have expected them to be here. And I feel a little bit offended that as a ward councillor, where I have been on the doorstep each time with residents asking me to what we could do as councillors to reduce speed and to reduce accidents, I find other people who don't live in my ward, who are not ward councillors, asking us not to go ahead with that. Now, there is many arguments in favour of limiting that. Thornton Heath ward alone, £300,000 if it's spent there to stop one person from being killed or hurt, I think it's enough. It's money worth spent. And for the whole of the north of Croydon, if we're thinking about £300, I don't think it's money that is not worth spent, considering the fact that there's so much demand for it. There is a road in my ward called Grange Road. We have been spoken to by residents for a long time. So many times we have had meetings. We've gone to see front rooms which have been hit by cars driving fast on that road. I don't think we are not doing something as a Labour administration, or this administration taking this decision is not a good thing. Now, we know that other places are having this. In fact, a lot of places in London, we have it in, I have a list of councils where this is being done. Now, I don't see why we should not do the same if it's safe for others. Now, it's not only in Croydon. We have other places like Portsmouth, Warrington, Edinburgh, Newcastle. Other places are doing 20 miles per hour. I don't think it's out of order. And I want to believe that this committee will find it important that we implement this decision as soon as possible for the benefit of our residents. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Matthew. The third person is Stuart, and then it'll be Karen after that, okay?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm here in my capacity as a ward member for West Thornton Ward to support the proposals to introduce 20-mile-an-hour speed restrictions in about a dozen roads in my ward. And as we've seen, the evidence in this report is very clear. A majority of residents support this policy, which was a very central plank of our manifesto on which every single one of Croydon North's 24 councillors were elected. And we hear a great deal in Croydon politics at the moment, and indeed from politicians in Croydon, that the Labour Council has supposedly broken election pledges. And here we have nearly half of the members of the opposition telling us that we should ignore a clear majority vote of residents affected and simply rip up an election manifesto pledge, which, frankly, I think is shocking in its own right. But that's not a sufficient reason, I think, for proceeding with this. I think we do need to look at the evidence, and there's a few things I'd identify in the report. Firstly, there's been reference this evening to the police. The report's very clear. The police have confirmed they have no objection to this scheme, and that 20-mile-an-hour roads will benefit from the same enforcement that they currently receive as 30-mile-an-hour roads. I also want to reject what I believe is a dangerous proposal that was advanced by Councillors Hopley and Thomas at the TMAC meeting, of which I'm a member, which suggests that we should introduce this patchwork of 20 and 30-mile-an-hour streets, so that you'd have this situation where you drive down one road, it's 20 mile an hour, you turn right, it becomes 30, you turn left, it's 20, you take the first turning on the right and it goes back to 30, but take the second turning on the right and it stays at 20. It's absurd, but not only that, if we look at the report, page 12, page 13, our experts, the engineers and the traffic managers that we employ make it very clear that this would cause confusion and, my emphasis, accidents would certainly increase manyfold. The final point I would make, Chair, which I think is important because I don't think it's actually in your scrutiny papers, but it was part of the TMAC report, and that's the data from the survey where it says a majority of residents say that they would drive more slowly if 20 miles an hour is introduced. A majority of residents say it would discourage rat running. A plurality of respondees said that it would reduce accidents and the severity of collisions. 1 in 5 people said that it would encourage them to cycle more, and 1 in 5 said it would encourage them to walk more. Matthew's absolutely right. Save one life, and that's worth it. But the benefits are much, much broader than that, and we should support this proposal this evening.
Stuart, about a minute over, so I will give Vidya that extra 50 seconds as well. Okay. The next, Karen.
I'm also ward councillor in Thornton Heath. I live in my ward, I work in my ward. So I feel as though I have got a bit more reason to be speaking on behalf of Thornton Heath than maybe people who don't live even in the vicinity. I've never had complaints about this, but what I did get today and yesterday was phone calls from people in my ward saying, do they need to come to the meeting? Would I be there supporting this? And I said I didn't need to come because some of them are parents and have got children, that I would be here supporting it. So it's the first time that it's not where the residents didn't want to come, they knew that their ward councillors were going to be turning up and speaking on their behalf. I can't explain how much of a good idea I think this is. I can't explain how much the residents want this. We knock on doors. We've been campaigning, we've been canvassing. People are asking, you said that we were getting 20 miles an hour, when are we getting them? They're not asking, when are you not going to give us it? They're asking, they want to know when it's going to arrive. So I think the quicker we do this, the better. I'm not going to speak much more because I think everybody said all the things I wanted to say. I also agree with what you said, and I thought you spoke eloquently and said everything that needed to be said. I have just one last thing that I would like to point out. Out of the 20, when the consultation was going on, the only complaint that I got, and the only phone calls I got, was people complaining about the fly posting about it, and it wasn't about the council's fly posting. They wanted to know who was going to pay, because they didn't want their tax-paying money used to take down the anti-posters. That was my only complaint, and it still is a complaint by people.
Okay, so thank you, Karen. Pat.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Pat Ryan, Upper Norwood Ward. I thank the group, my own group, really, for introducing a manifesto promise. It's one that's very, very popular in Upper Norwood. And again, to the Chair, to all the committee, really, that's responsible for this introduction, I'm grateful. I presented at least 4 or 5 petitions over a number of years, from Grange Road in particular, when really anybody that knows about traffic, Peter Morgan should well know about Grange Road. And Grange Road, really, you talk about racetracks and so forth. This is really one, bordering on Forden and Heath, really, when it's a regular occurrence to have cars in somebody's front garden on a fairly regular basis. The local schools, for example, the local schools in Upper Norwood, in that cluster of an area, welcome this news as well. We're bordering on Suddock and Lambert, and we know very well how popular they are in Suddock and Lambert. And indeed, I know that, Chair, that to give you a glaring example, I was approached by a number of people saying Suddock Council are going to introduce 20 miles an hour in Denmark Hill. It will never work. It will never work. You know, I've closely looked at Denmark Hill over the last year and a half, and people stop and allow you to walk across Denmark Hill. So this is a great example, really, of how valuable the 20 miles an hour is, and how greatly it's wanted by people on Grange Road, Queen Mary Road, Ryfield Road, Hermitage Road, you name it. It's great. They just can't wait. As Councillor Jude said, it's when we're going to get it, not if, when we're going to get it. They need it, they want it now, really. I think that Jeremy Leach really spelled out earlier on the real values and the savings as well. It's not just saving lives, but it's also saving money to the council. For a council that's apparently spends money at will, I think great care has been done about this. We welcome it in Upper Norwood, and I'm delighted to give them the opportunity to voice that opinion.
Thank you, Pat. Fiddy?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm really here on behalf of Councillor Yvette Hopley, who's the shadow member for transport. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here, and since I shadowed this portfolio last year, I have some good knowledge of the way this policy has progressed. Now, this has always been an ideologically driven policy by the Labour Party. I appreciate that this was in your manifesto, but I think what has really happened is certain vested interest groups who have the ability to shout the loudest have got a hearing, and I don't believe the public have really been heard on this matter. Now, when you're spending £300,000, I think you have to be really looking at. First question you ask is, what is the problem we are trying to solve here when we're spending that kind of money? Now, in these particular roads, and I mean specifically in the roads that are where you're going to introduce 20 miles per hour speed limits, what is the real situation regarding accidents? And we've never been given that evidence. I mean, we've always talked about borough-wide figures, accidents, and obviously in our major roads and our major arteries, and I accept that even one fatality is one too much. But in these roads where you're going to spend this amount of money, what is the evidence in terms of the accidents, and how many accidents are you actually going to reduce? And we have never, ever seen that evidence. So it really seems to me that you've got a solution searching for a problem rather than the other way around. Now, I know we've always been given a lot of evidence by Councillor B and the Council whenever we've had presentations on this issue, but you've always been very clever in sort of picking and choosing your evidence, because there is evidence out there that really questions whether the introduction of 20-mile-per-hour zones actually solves the problem of road safety. And there is also evidence that shows that in areas where it has been introduced, accidents have actually gone up because people tend to be more complacent in their behaviour. So I think just picking and choosing your evidence, you need to be really careful there. And also, I'm quite surprised that you're going ahead with spending this amount of money where your response rate was about 3%, from what I understand. In your own scrutiny paper, you've got a number of objectors and supporters at the back, and my calculation shows there were 23 people objecting and 6 supporting. So I don't know. I'm just looking at what you've given us at the papers at the back. And also, you have not really provided us with what the responses were on a road-by-road basis. I mean, we've always questioned this fact that this introducing a blanket 20-mile-per-hour zones, and rather your policy really should be to target this money in specific roads where the problem is the greatest. I mean, we've heard a lot about Grange Road. I think that's what you really should be doing, targeting the money at where the problem is the greatest, rather than this blanket ban. So I really have questions around whether it will improve safety in these roads, the evidence on which you're basing this, as well as the responses to your consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vidi. Robert?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm a Wadden councillor, of course, and Wadden wasn't in the area where the consultation took place, but we have had a very successful 20-mile-an-hour zone in Wadden for many years now. And I'm also a TMAC member, of course. I think it was very telling, as has already been pointed out, what exactly happened at the TMAC meeting. There wasn't a single resident from the affected area who came along to object to the proposal. And we should remember, of course, this is the business end of the proposal where the decision is being taken. There was no petition presented from anybody objecting to the scheme. Not a single local councillor came along to object to the scheme. And I think we've heard from lots of local councillors this evening who feel very strongly about this, that the scheme should be going ahead. And I know from my relatively short time as a councillor that if people are unhappy with the proposal, they let you know. What we had in this case is a very clear case of the silent majority going along with what the council is proposing. I think it's a fantastic idea. In terms of value for money, £300,000 I think is a very small price to pay if it saves just one life. The Department for Transport and others do estimates about what value to place on a life. I mean, there are, I think, moral questions about whether that's the right way to go about this, but the work is done, and typically the value of life is between sort of 1 and 1.8 million. So if this just saves one life, it's money well spent. And at the TMAC meeting, when the decision was taken to proceed with 20 miles an hour, I did ask the officers whether there had been accidents in any of the local streets in Area 1, and the answer was yes. So this is money that's very well spent. I think it's also worth noting that the funding comes from the local implementation plan. That is a TfL funding stream, and I'm sure TfL would let us know if they didn't like what we were doing. And as already been pointed out, doing it in an area-wide approach is the best way to do it in the most cost-effective way. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Robert. We've also have a statement in support of the decision has been received from Living Streets, and this has been circulated to members of the committees. I just want to pick out, I think a couple of highlights for those people who are watching the webcast. Living Streets, as many of you will know, or many may not know, used to be called the Pedestrian Association. So it's really from behalf of people who walk the streets, which is, a large majority of the people of Croydon. So, reducing traffic speeds and density makes our streets and public places more pleasant to be. It instantly becomes easier to cross the road, less noisy, and a more sociable environment to linger. It is also easier for pedestrians and cyclists to enjoy the same direct and safe routes for the journey as motorists. By adopting this level playing field approach to speed limits, local authorities can encourage pedestrians to take to the streets. And then it goes on, the Mayor of London is trialling 20-mile-an-hour speed limits on parts of the TRN, and the Mayor of London Roads Task Force report recommended 20 miles an hour limits on all local streets, high roads and city streets. And the TfL Pedestrian Safety Action Plan commits to supporting more boroughs to introduce 20 miles an hour. And I note from the list that are here that it lists boroughs like Islington and Southwark, but I should just also add that I understand that a borough called Wandsworth has committed to agreeing to a borough-wide 20 mile an hour without, I think, even the consultation that we're going through. They're just implementing it. So we've heard people speaking for and against this proposal. So this is a time to invite questions from committee members. So this can be of people that have spoken to it, or of the officers in particular, I imagine. So I'm just looking around to see who would like to ask the first set of questions in terms. Sarah? Well, all right. I'll take Mike. Welcome to the committee, Mike.
Thank you very much,
It was about 8 or 10 years since last time that you and me sat on the same screen.
It must be at least 10 years in the good old days. Eh? Can I start by asking some questions to Councillor B about the consultation? Because much has been made of the manifesto commitment, which says that introduce 20-mile-an-hour zones where residents want it. But we've heard from Mr Morgan that, in fact, in some distinct parts of the borough, there were votes against. Why is it that we haven't seen either postcode analysis, why hasn't that been made available to committee, road-by-road analysis, or any other type of analysis? Why is that not relevant, do you think?
I'm advised that it's data protection, but I also want to say that in terms of the responses that we had, when I spoke to people in the area, I did a lot of speaking to people because I really wanted to know what people thought once it was actually a proposal. A lot of us had, a number of councillors in the north and in central Croydon had done surveys of residents that had got sort of 70% in favour of this as a proposal. So did quite a lot of speaking to people. Also spoke to people on the doorstep, spoke to people in the street, and some people said that they'd voted no because they'd been provided with misinformation. So there was a no campaign that said that the main roads would also be made 20 mile an hour, which was not true. And quite a lot of people said to us that had they known that that was not the case, they would not have voted no. And we also came across a lot of people. I mean, we all know as councillors that you hear from the people who are opposed to something, that people who are genuinely happy with something get on with their life and, you know, don't necessarily engage. And that was very much the case with this, that lots and lots of people said, yeah, it's a great idea, yeah, I'll vote, yeah, I'll do, yeah. And so, you know, the overall, and this is borne out by the fact that there is evidence from the DFT research that support is actually much greater as well once it's gone in. So in terms of the consultation, you know, I am more than satisfied that it was a proper approach.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, it didn't answer the question at all. All of that information was very interesting. But actually, the question I asked is, why haven't you published? Now, the only answer you gave was data protection. But we do many surveys in this council where, in the past, we've done road-by-road surveys around traffic restrictions, and we've published the numbers in favour and the numbers against. I'm not suggesting you should go out there and say, Mr Smith, at number 10, Acacia Avenue, was in favour. But, you know, the answer you gave, whilst very laudable in the amount of information you gave about other things, didn't address that issue at all.
Steve, you've indicated you'd like to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The issue around data protection is providing the full postcode. So what we did as part of the Freedom of Information request that was put forward is we provided partial information. We're prohibited from providing the full postcode. So that's why we've restricted that.
Right. But do we as a council then have the information by ward, by road or by postcode that can be made available to this committee?
I think we just heard that this information has been released because the public member. But secondly, I'm just going to talk to Mike Barton to ask him to come in because when reading through the paper, it does address the issue of why this is on an area-wide basis. And I just wonder whether Mike Barton can address that issue in response. That would maybe give you some insight, Councillor Fisher, about whether it's why this is on an area-wide rather than on a street-by-street or postcode-by-postcode.
Well, I think we've already heard from other people around the room today that doing it on a piecemeal approach would not be as effective. It wouldn't be as cost-wise, wouldn't be as effective either. So to do it on an area basis by this one whole area is how you're going to get it down to the 300,000 and make it cost-effective. So even if we did have some analysis of breaking it down by ward or road or area, are you then suggesting we do them piecemeal from that data? Because the idea is that we've gone out to a whole area, Area 1, and asked people whether they want it in that whole area in order to achieve it in the way we set out.
Now, I understand the point that Mr Barton made, but the question I was asked was quite a simple one. Why haven't we got that information? I haven't suggested anything else. I've just asked why aren't we allowed to have it?
So can I also point out that if you look in terms of the call-in, okay, information is the people who sign a call-in request information to back up the support of any call-in, and so they respond to what's written in here. I'm looking to see whether within this call-in that formal request for this information to be provided on a road-by-road basis.
Well, that's not formal, but it does talk about individual roads and areas.
No, sorry. We do not support. This is basically a contention.
Chair, can I help? I mean, the call-in refers to looking at this in areas of particular need. I mean, we didn't specifically request the information that we're talking about, but this information has been raised, and there is a very good point about the fact that if we understood where people were requesting this, based on what we've heard and what you have known about prior to this meeting in terms of requests under FOI, it would have been a lot easier for us to understand your decision to go ahead with this. Because the way it stands at the moment, we are being told that there are areas that on paper don't want it, and there are areas that do want it, but we can't see that evidence. That's the issue.
I'll just refer councillors to page 78 at 79 in the pack numbers. Okay. Okay, so on page 79, it says information required to assist the Scrutiny Overview Committee to consider this, see budget and following sheet. Okay, so this is what we were given. So I'll read it out. While the Conservative administration supports the implementation of 20 mile an hour in roads where residents have highlighted problems or accidents and hydrants, we are unable to support a blanket ban. We do not believe, right? And it goes on, and this report should be directed. Nowhere in here did it ask us for a breakdown on a road-by-road basis. So I asked officers to produce a report and also to reproduce some sort of information for us based on what you asked for.
Well, can I thank you, Mr Chairman, for that? Well, I would thank you, but I don't think it was particularly helpful. The truth of the matter is, surely you bring the information to committee. You don't go, oh, hang on, you haven't asked for this specific thing, so we'll leave that behind. Openness and transparency we hear a lot about. Surely come with the full figures. That's all I ask. But let me move on to another point, because you're finding that one quite difficult. So let's move on to the issue about how the consultation was undertaken. You decided, and Councillor B used the words, where more than one person from a household responded, we decided to amalgamate the results that were given to us. How does that work? So if you go to a household and somebody sends in a form saying, I'm in favour of the 20 mile an hour, somebody else sends one in saying, I'm against, how did you amalgamate those results into one response?
That was all set out in the information that was provided in great detail, so I would have hoped that the people coming here would have read that.
Well, explain it to me, because clearly I don't understand it.
So, if you had one in favour and... If I miss anything out, officers will tell me, but one in favour, one against, it was neutral. 2 in favour and 1 against, it was 1 in favour. And that is set out in the in the FAQs that were provided, that was all made clear in terms of the way that the process was being conducted. It was set out as well in the Cabinet paper that approved it, that we would be doing a household survey, and that was the process. So that has been in the public domain for a year.
Didn't you just do what most normal people would have done and taken the electoral roll and allowed anybody on that to respond? Surely that's the most sensible way to go about. We don't go into the polling station for a council election or whatever else and then say, hang on a minute, we're just going to amalgamate the results for whatever, do we? I mean, surely that would have been the most open and transparent way of doing it. Why didn't we do that?
We just felt it would give us a more balanced result in terms of households. And yeah, actually, the result would have been the same. But what I would also say to this is, you've had a very long time. This went to Cabinet a year ago. It seems to me that you hadn't even read the papers then, that we've had, opposition to this. In terms of the survey, just to be absolutely clear before you come to the other one, you also raised the issue of the numbers of people responding. In 2011, you conducted a budget simulator exercise, and you had 2,500 responses from the whole of the borough, and you used those responses to make your decisions on the budget, and you considered that that was adequate. And we have had, this is a fifth of the area, so it's 5 times the level of response, but it's also because it's a household basis, and that was individuals. It is more than 5 times the response, and in fact your paper says that only 1,100 completed it fully, so you could say you only had 1,000 responses.
Well, can I thank Councillor B for that? No, I suppose when we're looking at future elections, perhaps we ought to look at this approach of a more balanced result of taking household results rather than allowing people to go to polling stations. Perhaps it's something the government should look at in terms of democracy. I'm not sure it's one that will catch on there. Can I move on then to the issue of enforcement? Can Councillor B explain to me how she thinks this is going to be enforced by the police? If we're already seeing from the evidence that you put up there that some people are travelling well in excess of 30 miles an hour now, there appears to be little or no enforcement, and my understanding is there's going to be no additional resources for enforcement here. How she thinks this is going to have any effect?
Police will enforce this in the same way that they currently enforce. So there is no difference. What happens, we have a process whereby people can ask, where there are issues, where speeding is a problem, you can ask for road watch, where people go along and they'll do some monitoring, and the police will work with that. It's exactly the same through this process. What we have said is, all along, from the very start of this process, we have said that when we measure the speeds afterwards, if we find areas where there isn't a significant reduction and we are concerned about that, we will look at additional measures in terms of traffic calming. That has been in the process all the way through, so there's no change on that. And the police are have not objected to this, and it's really important. And as you will see, the vast majority of roads fall within the criteria for active enforcement by the police without additional traffic calming. So there is no issue whatsoever in the police failing to enforce this in the manner they currently enforce 30 mile an hour. And I'm not hearing people objecting to that level of enforcement in terms of 30 mile an hour, so they should be completely happy with that at 20 mile an hour, because there's no change.
Just a couple more questions, and then I'll finish. How did you, as a Cabinet member presumably, decide upon this area as an area for consultation, and what factors did you take into account?
We actually looked, because the main roads would be staying at 30 mile an hour, the main cost in terms of implementation is signage. So officers looked at the roads that would be staying at 30 mile an hour, and they looked at areas. I mean, they're similar sized areas which fall within the main roads. So officers were able to draw a line through. Sorry.
Just thinking that Mike may have, as the man who will have 20 mile an hour written on his back probably for the rest of his life, as the man who designed the whole system, I believe, or your team did.
Yeah, I was just about to say, actually, Councillor B had it dead right. We were just trying to break down the borough into 5 manageable parts. The reason we chose 5 was simply because of the finances, and we thought we could get 300,000 each year. And then you've got to look at how you break the borough down into 5 parts. There is a main road network which we're retaining at 30, and so that guides you as to where those boundaries might be. And those 5 areas seemed very equal in the number of roads within them, and they just fell into place. There's nothing particular about those 5. It could have been 5 different areas, and we'd have simply worked our way through them in a different way. But those 5 are what we came up with at the working group and seemed to work well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barton. So really had nothing to do with communities as per the manifesto commitment where communities wanted. It had to do with 5 arbitrary areas of the borough. Thank you for that. That's very useful. I just wondered if you took into account Councillor King's point about confusion, because obviously if you look at this area, there must be 70 or 80 roads that border onto it. Surely we're creating a lot of confusion there, because people will come out of the 20-mile-an-hour zone and then think, hang on, am I going into a 30-mile-an-hour zone? Equally, they'll be coming from a 30-mile-an-hour zone from these 70 or 80 roads into a 20-mile-an-hour zone. And as Councillor King said, that's a recipe for manifold accidents. Did you take that into account in your consideration?
What you're saying there, then any change in speed would be a problem. Because because we have gone for larger areas, it is quite simply what we are aiming for at the end of this process, it'll take a little bit of time to roll it out, is that the main roads are 30 mile an hour consistently in Croydon, and the residential roads are 20 mile an hour. And that should bring great clarity, rather than the idea proposed by members of the opposition that we should have a little patchwork and 20 here, 30 here, 20 here, 30 there. If all the residential roads bounded by the main roads are 20 miles an hour, it will be very clear that in Croydon you drive at 20 miles an hour in the residential roads, and if you want to go at 30 miles an hour, you should be on a main road.
But that'll only be the case if the other areas vote for the 20 miles an hour, won't it? Otherwise, there will be a part of the borough that has a 20-mile-an-hour zone and other parts of the borough that don't. Is that not right?
That is right, but because the boundary is a main road, you have a whole area bounded within that area, so we have got quite a clear designation of each area, so that's part of the process, so that should other areas not want it, we have not got little divides within sort of residential areas. So we've gone for boundaries of main roads so that it is very clear. But I'm expecting that large areas of the borough will support this.
Sherwin.
Thank you, Chair. I think because this consultation went by area-wise, so it's irrelevant to have, every road, how many people said yes, some people said no. So it's just irrelevant. But again, of course, every time we do knock on the people in the door, they say, oh, car is driving too fast, too fast. So I'm also Norbury councillor. So exactly same things our people support as well to reduce the speed, no doubt about it. My main question is to not question, of course, I would like to have your opinion. Everybody is saying about the money, 300,000 baht. But I think if you accumulate the long-term saving, life saving, and other things, what mentioned by Councillor Matthew, which is, I think, really important. One life is, cost more than £3 million even, and 300,000 pounds, I think, is not much in comparison with this thing. What is your opinion? Sorry, in terms of health and safety and well-being for the community.
I think every life is worth saving. If we save one life, it is worth it. And what I have to say we haven't heard from those who are opposed to this is, what is the problem in bringing speeds down? We've heard all sorts of issues raised, but what I've not heard is why actually we should try to keep speeds at 30 miles an hour, which seems to be what they are proposing.
Just a few questions. So, how many residents' associations actually bothered to come and oppose this? None.
None.
None. But there were a number of resident associations that either through ward councillors or took the trouble off their own back to support this?
Yes.
Right. I've just got a question. If you look at your distribution, so this is on your
this page of your... So, forgive me, but it actually would, if there are a line of cars driving down any one road, it only takes the first one to drive at 20 miles an hour that the ones following are forced to speed. So if you take the first location, you know, the number of cars that are driving between 26 and 31 miles an hour, so that's whatever, 2,100 over the course of 24 hours, so you know, X number per hour, you would actually get a significant decrease in speed for more than just the one car if that car, the leading of that row, stopped to 20 miles an hour. So there is an element of self-enforcement, as is my theory. Am I thinking along the right lines?
Yes, you are entirely right.
Great, thank you. A couple more questions. Just to confirm what was said earlier, the police have said that their same enforcement procedures will be in place, whether it's a 20-mile zone or a 30-mile-an-hour zone. It will just be that they'll be measuring it against 20, not 30. Yes. That's all correct. And the thing is, I find these questions about how to value a life, I find this very difficult, given I just find the whole idea of valuing a life a relatively difficult concept. But I think if you were to ask the residents in my ward, which is directly affected, and many people have been asking this, given the topography of the narrow streets and cars, you know, I'd be interested to see any information about how many people think that actually £300,000 to even save one life is actually a decent amount of money, given the area, the sheer area of roads that are affected. But that's more of a comment than a question. But thank you for answering the questions. I may have more later.
I've got a comment to start with, and that is really the concept that because people haven't registered their support that they're against, and generally my view of this is based on my experience with my residents, basically, that where people are happy with a proposal, then they don't bother to register the fact that they're happy. You're more likely to get objections. Certainly in my ward has a 20-mile-an-hour limit on the Fieldway estate, as in the same kind of way as Councillor Canning was outlining. And I think it's actually, because other parts of the estate are 30 miles an hour, it's actually quite confusing, even though you have a signage at the beginning and at the end, because there's no real distinction between where what's a residential road and what's a main road. And I think it would actually be a benefit to people in my ward if only the main roads were 30 miles an hour and all the residential roads were 20 miles an hour. I think it would be much clearer, and on that basis, I think that's the basis that this consultation has been conducted and the way the roads have been designed. Would that be correct?
Yes, that would be correct.
Looking at some of the statistics that have been sort of put around, it talks about 889 accidents in 2013. Can you tell me, of those 889 accidents, how many of those were actually on main roads, and how many of these accidents were on side roads, and the ones that you're proposing to change to 20 miles per hour?
If Mike could respond on this.
I mean, we can certainly get that information to you. The vast majority, to be truthful, is they're going to be on the main road network. But as I think, again, people have said around here, if we've got 20 or 30 in an area, which is probably about the sort of thing we have got in each of these areas, and we can save a few of them, it'll still be money well spent.
I don't think there's any question with anyone who has spoken tonight that a life is worth saving. And I think there is an implication that because we're not supporting a zone being changed to 20 miles per hour, we're not supporting life. And that is entirely wrong. And I actually feel quite offended that that is the projection you as a group are putting across, that we don't put the same value on a life as you do. And you know as well as I do that that is not the case. We all value lives equally. And I don't think putting a pound sign, however high it is, on a life is acceptable, because all life is worth more than money, and we all know that. Now, going on from the answer that Mr Barton has just given us, what I'm concerned about is that there is a significant amount of money being put in a zone where we have the information that gives us the locations that these accidents, of which we don't want any, are taking place, but we're not targeting the resource we've got into the areas that have the highest number of accidents. That's my concern. And therefore, this is about saving as many lives and preventing as many accidents as possible. Because if the majority of these accidents are on main roads, and you're saying that the main roads are not included in this, then we're not focusing the limited resource that we have in the correct way. Can I have your comments on that, please?
I'll start on this, and officers might want to come in afterwards. The vast majority of traffic is on our main roads, and the vast majority of accidents happen on where there's more traffic and where there is junctions. There is already money spent on looking at those accident hotspots. There's already work that is done around junctions to improve crossings on a regular, and there has been for a very long time, and accidents have been coming down. This is a different approach about a different issue, so they're not in contradiction. And one of the things that we would very much like to do is make it easier for people to walk on the residential roads, to be more to make them more attractive and to make it a pleasanter place for people to walk, so that we can get people, away from the main roads in terms of walking. But they're not contradictory. And it is certainly not the case that work has not gone on in looking at identifying accident hotspots and putting in improvements in those areas. But it will always be the case that you will get the maximum number, you will get most accidents on the very busy roads and in places where there are junctions, because that's where you get the most conflict. However, you will get a loss of benefit for people in more than one way by introducing the 20-mile-an-hour scheme. So, it's not that we're not doing things on those junctions, and it's not that we won't be doing things on the junctions. This is a complementary piece of work.
In terms of the information that... Sorry,
Jo was going to come in. Just to come back, in terms of the question of are there major accidents? I guess that's the question. Are there major accidents within that northern area? And I guess it picks up on Councillor Fisher's point as well about the data. We do have that data, and we're happy to share that with the committee. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing, in terms of there is specific, issues in terms of road accidents. There's been anecdotal stuff, but we have the evidence to support that there are streets within that northern zone that experience major traffic accidents. It kind of begs the question about why we're going for an area basis as opposed to a single street. Well, I think that was picked up in some ways by Councillor King, but in terms of it being much more cost effective to look at whole area than it is on individual streets. And as Councillor B said, the area is bounded by A roads, so that is the demarcation between the 20-mile-per-hour zone and the 30-mile-per-hour zone. So in terms of it actually being easy for people to understand, because ultimately what we're trying to do is change people's behaviour here. We're not trying to change people's behaviour on an individual road. We're trying to change people's behaviour generally, and the way to do that is by doing it in a whole area, not by single streets. So on the basis of, if one of the drivers is behavioural change, on the basis of that, but also on the basis of cost, and your key issue is obviously about value for money, it's much more cost effective for us to do it in a whole area, and much easier for residents to understand the delineation between 20-mile-per-hour zones, which are bounded by the A roads in that northern area, and those that are 30-mile-per-hour.
Thank you. And on a slightly different issue, in the presentation you say that having these 20-mile-an-hour zones will improve the public realm. One of the things we talked about at our last Streets and Environment Scrutiny meeting was the sort of Metropolitan Centre, and we were talking about decluttering streets and making them more open, making them feel more accessible for people, and to actually make them feel, safer, because, there isn't so much blocking views. You talk about improving the public realm. This seems to go against what the last meeting was saying in terms of taking things away from streets, decluttering them. You're talking about putting up signage everywhere within this particular zone. So can you explain how you feel that this scheme will improve the public realm? But also, you've made statements that more people will walk, more people will cycle. Can you tell me where that evidence comes from? Because regardless of whether a road's 30 miles an hour or 20 miles an hour, as long as it has a pavement, generally people are happy to walk on it. I understand if it's a road without a pavement, that's a hugely different issue. But we're talking about, you know, roads in this borough that all have pavements. So I'd be grateful for your information on the evidence of that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sure officers will come in if I forget something. But just first, in terms of the signage, actually, your proposal of doing it here, there and everywhere would cause a lot more clutter, and that's actually the response that has been put in the answers to questions, so it was there to see, because we're going to put the signs at the boundary, and then they're going to be repeater painted signs on the road. So that's not going to be masses of clutter on the roads, but if we did individual roads, we would then have, at the entrance to lots of roads, we would have signs, so that would increase clutter. But the improvement to the public realm is about people not feeling dominated by traffic. And so I would say that the evidence for that is supported by the research that is being done for the DFT by a company called Atkins. And what they have reported is that there's a proportion of people who are saying that they are walking more and that they are cycling more since 20 mile an hour has been introduced. So that is, and what they've done, they're in the middle of this research, so they haven't published anything yet, but it was made public at a conference, and they've gone to a number of areas where 20 mile an hour speed limits have been introduced rather than the zones, because a lot of the evidence that's around has been around the zones where they've had traffic calming, and there's been limited evidence around the areas where it's just been speed limits. So they're specifically focusing on that. So the things that they have reported is that there's a 75% support afterwards, whereas 50% before, and that's what the evidence that they've found from interviewing people. So it's clearly popular after it's gone in, and that there is a proportion of residents who say they walk more and they cycle more. Now, I think it was about 9% for cycling more, and that's actually quite high, because we're not expecting everybody to leap on their bike. And it's about the feeling of car dominance. We have a lot of people also who are apprehensive about their children walking to school and walking locally and tend to drive them. And people feel uncomfortable where they feel that the car is dominating. So what I would say is that this is a strongly held view by people who've done a lot of work. So Living Streets have done a lot of work in terms of promoting pedestrians and making it comfortable for people to walk. So they very much support this, and they've been working in the field for a very, very long time. So I would look at all the things that they have said about this if you want further evidence. But again, there is more support for this from the Atkins research, that people are saying that the evidence they're saying is that some people are saying they are walking more and some people are saying they're cycling more.
As you said, this isn't evidence that's actually been produced yet as a formal document. Cathy Beach said that it wasn't yet a completed document. It was just some forward information.
The Atkins research is not, but obviously there's lots of information from Living Street.
And that's what you referred to. You also referred to the cost of... you also said a lot of this signage was going to be painted on the road rather than having lots of signs around, which is great news. But can you tell me what the revenue cost going forward is of repainting the roads?
If I can just make a quick correction, there will be very small signs on existing lamp columns, and the whole exercise, I think, should be also seen as a decluttering exercise, because what we are doing when we're carrying out these signage approach is looking at the existing signs, removing redundant posts, combining signs onto a single. So it's not just there's going to be a whole rash of new signs and that's all people are going to be seeing. There will be small signs within the zone to make it clear to anyone, and that's according to, obviously, the regulation requirements, to make it absolutely clear that you're driving within a 20, or you're driving, if you see no such signs, you're driving within a 30. So just going back on the signage again, it's more about, I would say, decluttering just as much as making it clear where you are in terms of what you should be driving at.
And what's the revenue implication?
It's all absorbed within the 300,000 which we've estimated.
But after the zone has been done, there'll be additional revenue implication going forward. What was that be?
So just to add about the revenue implication. So what as part of that, we'll absorb that within the highway maintenance budget, and actually the value of repainting roundels is relative. In fact, it's very cheap per roundel, and the repainting is cyclical, so you're looking at probably every 3 to 5 years before you need to paint one again. So it's low value. It's far cheaper to do that than it would be to have the vast array of signs, the electrical connection for those signs, and the energy consumption for the lights that those signs need to operate from.
No, I was going to ask a question about the source of the funding from the local implementation plan and what happens if it's not spent, but I've actually just seen the answer to my question in the report. So.
Okay, I've just got some questions, and then I'm going to ask Cabinet members and officers to they can leave the meeting once we've done that, because we're going to have a discussion about how we're going to take this matter forward. As I said, it's just a question that I have, which is about, maybe it's generally. So why is it okay to slow traffic outside schools, but it's not okay to do it outside a child's home? Right? Do you have any views on that, Councillor B?
I think slowing traffic outside schools just really misses the point. Lots of children walk quite a long way to school. They walk through a number of roads on any number of routes. So, although you may get, you'll get a high percentage of children outside of school, in order to get there, if they're walking, they will have to have walked through a number of other roads. So if 20 mile an hour is considered appropriate for helping children to walk to school, it needs to be along the whole route and not just at school.
I'm just going to run through some of the objections that we've heard, and then I'll give the ones I felt. We've touched on base about 97% seem to be happy with the status quo, so there's no need to change. And your comment to that is?
I would say 97% were happy with the proposal and didn't want to object to it.
We heard that self-enforcing is not enough, right? Seem to be a line used in terms of traffic speeds. I think we may have covered that point when Councillor Ben covered that. There was a number of questions about Peter mentioned about ballot stuffing, right? It seems to be some sort of practice that some people may engage in. But I don't know what your comments on whether, do you believe either that, the assumption is either you stuff the ballots or your officers stuff the ballots. What's your response to that?
No, there wasn't any ballot stuffing, and every effort. It also helped that we were excluding people from outside of the area, so that people from, because people who were campaigning from outside, both yes and no, were responding, and those were all excluded. And also only doing things one per household meant that if we did have two per, if a family wanted to respond a lot and were all clubbing together to do it, we were weeding out the extras. So I think the process kept down any potential for ballot stuffing of various sorts.
Another Roger.
Can I just add that I think that if Mr Lawson feels that there was any wrongdoing to do with the ballot, he should make a formal complaint to the council about it, and we will investigate it. Okay, so what we also have is that there's a belief that livability is a hot air concept. I don't know whether you want to respond to whether on that. Whether livability is and sustainability. It's not a hot air subject. I mean, the whole purpose of surely what we're trying to do with all of our policies is to ensure that we create really great places where people live and work and want to be.
That it seems that the Roger, from what organisation, Alliance of British Motorists, accepts that there will be a 1% reduction in speed, but that will have won't have any impact on road safety. You had your 2 minutes. Would someone like to come back on that issue about would a 1% reduction in speed have no impact on road safety?
I can't understand how you would think that any reduction in traffic speed couldn't possibly have a difference to certainly the injuries of any collision that then take place. It's almost inevitable that any sort of reduction in speed is going to result in a lesser impact for those people that are involved in a collision, and therefore far less injuries or more likely to live or whatever. So it's I don't understand that whatsoever.
Something to that. We were at quite a lot of us here. We were at a road safety event for school children last week, and the phrase that kept on coming up was the faster you go, the faster you crash. And that was about the impact. And I mean, it was really hard hitting. And I think it didn't leave any of us with any doubt whatsoever about the impact of speed in accidents.
Okay. All right. Where we are now is that we've heard the presentation. We've agreed to review this matter. We've heard the evidence from the officers and the Cabinet member who made a decision at TMAC. We've heard two objectors, one supporter and local ward councillors. We've asked questions of people. I'm going to ask now to the Cabinet members and officers to leave the rooms. Everyone else can stay, but this will now be a matter for a discussion among the committee, and we're going to have to decide, once we've had a formal discussion on what we've heard, we have three options, which is we have that the committee has concerns about the decision and that we should refer it back to the Cabinet member for reconsideration, and we would then have to provide reasons relating to the nature of our concerns. Secondly, our second option is the committee consider the decision is outside the budget and policy framework of the Council, and it may refer the decision to the Council. I've not heard that actually that is something that was in the original referral, but we will have a chance to discuss as a committee. And the third option is the committee decides there is no further action is necessary, then the decision may be implemented. So what we're going to do is going to ask officers and the Cabinet member to leave, and you can stay in the back if you want to, but we're going to discuss this matter as a committee and then make a decision about what our recommendation will be. Thank you. Take that in our general discussion among the committee. Okay, so, dear committee members, you're all very dear to my heart. We've heard the evidence today. What we have is we do have a decision of a Cabinet member in the TMAC committee. It's laid out before us. We've heard evidence and we've heard from the committee. I'm going to ask the committee to give an indication that there were three options. I don't want us to propose any of them, because what happens when someone formally proposes an option, then we've got to go to a vote, and then that basically kills the discussion. So I always want to give all committee members around this table at least one chance to speak regarding this matter before we go to a vote. So I'd just like to have some first general comments from committee members and a view as to which item recommendation they're inclined to support.
I mean, I'd feel that this should be referred back, because I think there is a significant amount of information that we actually haven't received. That being the accident data and where it takes place, because I think actually it is important to focus on areas where there is the highest amount of problem, and actually use the limited resources that we have to deal with that most effectively. I think there's also the questions that have been raised around the postcode issue that relates to the consultation itself, whether there are areas that have actually said no, and areas that have actually said yes, and whether that should be looked into further as sort of areas that actually do want this implemented and areas that don't want this implemented. And without the information, I know we didn't specifically ask for it, but if that information was available, we should have been given it. So it can be looked at further to decide actually where the best resource of the money is being spent.
I'd agree with that, Mr. Chairman. And can I just say straight off that, you know, this isn't about, as Councillor Bashford said earlier, people on this side not wanting to reduce road accidents, not wanting to stop injuries. It's about whether or not the use of this money is best used in this way, with an area-wide ban, or not used in another way, just target specific areas. And Councillor Keremire made an excellent point there, a very powerful point about Grange Road, a road which I know very well. When I was first elected to this council, part of that road was in my ward, and it has had a long history. If we were talking about targeting money on areas like that, I believe actually we could reduce many more accidents. So this is about, I think that we need the data that Councillor Bashford talked about. We need the information about how people actually voted in this consultation, rather than this catch-all that we've been given by the council. And I think when we have that information, it would be much better to see whether or not this blanket approach, as opposed to the more targeted approach, was the way forward.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we have seen a really comprehensive presentation presented by Kathy B, with a lot of statistics and comparison from the other boroughs and other areas. But in terms of money, of course, sounds very, very high, 300,000, but it's not the issue of the money. I think because people have already given their commitment. Like when we did put on our manifesto, yes, they want 20-mile driving speed limit, which is already committed once. Again, because the consultation is not only done, not one road, two road, it's whole area. So I think it's irrelevant to ask for which road want 20 miles and which road doesn't want 20 miles. So this is one point I think is not to point the question about which road we want 20-mile zone, which road doesn't want 20-mile zone. Lastly, I think if you think about the not only accident, the hot air, what you were talking about, fear of people going on the road, cycling as well as walking. If it's in a small road, people drive for 30 miles speed. People are not going to come out with their pushchair for the children or walking, or sometimes 2-3 kids walk on the pavement. They can go to the road as well. So I think in all these things, effect, I think, is really good decision they have taken for 20-mile zone to be implemented the area basis. Yeah.
I would come to the same conclusion as my colleague who just spoke. I'm persuaded by the unanimous agreement from all councillors in the wards concerned. Likewise, no objections from residents' associations. In fact, quite the opposite, many in favour. The consultation itself provided a positive result, full stop. I'm also persuaded that the zoning approach, which is buttressed by main roads, makes it very clear which are residential and main road areas, and not causing confusion with, some roads where there is a speed increase and slow down then in the way that Councillor King described. I'm persuaded that the police will enforce in the same way as they do other 30-mile-an-hour zones. Leave aside the other issues. I'm persuaded, I think, by those arguments, particularly, and the concept of it only takes a couple for many others to have to follow to reduce the speed in the way that we spoke about. And I'm persuaded by the statistics that suggest a reduction in speed both reduces the number of accidents and the severity of those accidents as and when they still occur. So I would agree with tend to the same conclusion as my colleague.
I'm just going to say that Councillor Ben has said it all, really.
Thank you. I have to say I don't disagree with Councillors Ben overview. But I also just want to put this into context. We had 8 years of a previous administration, this is, and whereby the amount of money spent on road improvement wasn't a significant factor. We had a cabinet member who didn't like road humps and road improvements in areas, okay? And actually very much, he was very much opposed. And the reason why Grange Road is one of those roads that doesn't have any road humps, even though it has lots of accidents, is because the cabinet member for 8 years was never keen. I had the same issue with my own ward of Davison Road, where officers recommended a number of actions, and they were overturned on the basis of objections from a couple of local councillors. Who were Conservative at the time, I should haste to add. So we had a history in the past of the Cabinet member listening to local councillors. We are then faced with a new administration. I'm just putting forward the case whereby the amount of funding available for road safety is limited, and the money available is coming from the Mayor of London's TfL budget, and which in a roundabout way we all pay for, but we were looking for a value for money scheme which had the greatest impact in terms of road safety, in a sense for the smallest outlay possible. And it is the case, you can spend £300,000 and you could do one road. But the evidence in the paper and in the previous Cabinet reports and what was discussed at TMAC, I understand, shows that in a time of limited budgets, we need to expend our money in a way that we gain the maximum benefit. And the idea that a 1% reduction in speed at least doesn't have any impact in terms of traffic accident statistics is risible. It is clear from the other boroughs, including Conservative Wandsworth, they have accepted the argument that this is a good thing in terms of traffic accidents and it's a good thing in terms of livability. And we have a Conservative Mayor of London promoting 20 mile an hour on major roads in the town centre. It does seem rather strange that the last people left opposing 20 miles an hour are the people who don't even live in the borough, of that part of the borough. So when we look through this issue, there were many objections made, and I think they were comprehensive responses. This idea that this will cause more clutter, this will be more expensive, that this won't save lives, was mentioned by someone, that the issues of that the residents don't want it, that all the way through consultation have taken place. Personally, as a councillor, and KVP would not particularly want me to say this, I would have gone for a much faster approach. I would have gone for a 1 or 2 year approach, and frankly, I would have done, if we had the resources available, I would have gone for a one borough consultation in place across Croydon. We do not have the resources to implement this scheme across the borough, so the sensible approach, the financially sensible approach, promoted by Councillor B and their officers to do it over 5 years and 5 zones, has approached that is, one, has positive effects, and secondly, it also is financially viable. This issue currently also being promoted that somehow getting postcode information about whether Norbury voted for it and South Norwood against, or vice versa, is a reason. But the very nature of communities is they are arbitrary. My community, where I consider my part of Addiscombe, I sat in a meeting for 2 years, Residents Association, and we could never draw a map of Croydon and work out where the actual boundaries of Addiscombe was. Right? Everyone's concept of where their community is, normally sense with their house being in the middle, the local shop and everything else is up for dispute. So the idea that we should have made this on the basis of either ward boundaries or on someone from another part of the borough saying that the residents of Norbury have a road network should be slightly different, I think is something that was never going to be obtainable. So my view is that we shouldn't refer this matter back. But I also want to do, as I always do in scrutiny, to try and get some sort of agreement on certain aspects, because scrutiny is at its best when both sides at least have some sort of agreement on what the outcome is. Sorry, no, I'm not taking anything. I'm not. Sorry, I'm summing up. Sorry, Matthew. No, sorry, Matthew. That's it. What I would like to propose is that that we ask the cabinet member. This is just more of a consider to review how this issue was handled over this last year, see whether there are any lessons that we can learn. There are a number of legitimate objections. All the objections in this paper, particularly TMAC paper, are legitimate. There are responses in there, and I'll be very keen that when any new item comes forward on this matter, that we somehow are able to show that we have at least reviewed those objections and see how we have either incorporated them or have considered them when we consider the next round. Otherwise, I'm going to propose that formally that this committee, listening to the fact that I've heard 3 other people saying that we should take no further action and 2 that says we should refer it back, I'm going to formally propose for the committee to decide that no further action is necessary, and in that case the decision may be implemented. We normally don't go to a vote, but if you want to go to a vote, we will. Okay, so I'll just put it to the vote that this committee decides that no further action is necessary. All those say aye? Aye. And all those opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. The meeting is now closed.